Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I want to talk about Fanatics and their ability to grow their market share. And one of the major problems they're going to have, because right now they're going to grow it with baseball cards, the acquisition of Topps. So if you go to this article that came out in early March, you have Ken Turner, who is their Fanatics Chief Marketing Officer, CMO, talks about his plans and talks about we're just at the beginning. We're going to invest. We're going to bring creative campaigns. They're talking about experiences, activation experiences. We see that with like how they're trying to get cards that you can redeem to get athletes to follow you on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. I don't know, like just things like that. And it's just trying to be more aggressive in marketing and have these campaigns. Now, one of the things they did was they had the Julio Rodriguez, videos, cooking shows, all that stuff with Julio Rodriguez, and that is one of the problems that you have right now. And here it talks about the J Rod show, right? And how they've done all this clips, and they're going to use these clips to grow the hobby and generate engagement on social media. And I'm just going to tell you, here's a big problem. So if you go over to the 50 most marketable athletes of 2022, which this has been done by Sports Pro for a while, they used to have Q scores, and this has sort of replaced that a little bit. But if you go through this list, the one thing you'll find, so one is Cristiano Ronaldo, there's LeBron James, Messi, Serena Williams, Lewis Hamilton, Alex Morgan. There's a lot of women on this list. That's probably another issue for Topps. You've got a lot of basketball players, soccer players. You've got a lot of different sports, skiing. So you've got a lot of things on here that aren't traditional U.S. based sports, because this is talking about the world. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because there is no baseball players on this 50 list. There's golf players, there's all kinds of other sports on here. F1, swimming, and I know right now there's people like, angrily shaking their fists at the screen because they think there's no way that these are the most marketable players, but this is worldwide. And one of the problems with the marketing strategy for Fanatics, in my opinion, is they're too focused on their base fans, people who are already baseball fans or sports cards fans. You're going to have to reach out to other collecting bases like women, other countries, other people to get them to be interested in the sport and then in the cards, right? So if you're not really interested in baseball, then I don't think you're really going to grow 10x unless you get people really interested in baseball. And them doing the J Rod show was around the idea that they need to get people to really know the athletes, like their personalities, and maybe watch the sport. And again, baseball with the pitch clock and all the rule changes are trying to make the sport more appealing to a different generation. So there is things that are happening that might work. So I'm not saying that this can't work. What I'm saying is they have a major problem. And again, with the marketing strategy that they've done for the first part of their phase, it is really just appealing to their current fan base. So they're running ads on radio, they're running ads, on hobby channels or things that are already focused on people who maybe already kind of sold on either the sport or the cards. Now, this idea that baseball athletes aren't marketable is not new. If you go back, and hopefully this loads, sorry, to 2016, you get ESPN writers talking about, the real problem with Mike Trout is that he's just not very interesting. And Mike Trout has been the face of this sport for basically a decade. And so this isn't new either. You've had Fernando Tatis the last couple of years that seemed more marketable, then he gets hurt. Manny Machado, people don't like him. Now J Rod's coming up, so maybe people will like him. But it's almost like, there's just not a player like a Ken Griffey Jr. that we had in the 90s that people can really say this guy is really charismatic. People just like him and they want to like buy his image and just have like just a following and want to really be interested in this guy. You know, you can't always pick and choose who the best players in the game are and make them charismatic and cool. And this Mike Trout issue has been talked about multiple times. If you just Google Mike Trout and boring, you're going to get 20 or 30 articles popping up about writers and just people talking about that baseball had kind of this boring reputation until maybe just the last year or so when all these changes are happening because, all the players were kind of cookie cutter. And Mike Trout was your best player, and he didn't really do much from a standpoint of growing the game in terms of creating new fans because he was just kind of like do his job and go home. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're trying to grow a brand like Fanatics is, that's a problem. And I think this is something that they're going to have to deal with is they've got no real athletes and they're trying to create one in J-Rod to kind of carry the flag, to be the guy who's going to be the next Ken Griffey Jr., the Michael Jordan, the Kobe Bryant, somebody who people just like and want to watch play and collect their cards and get their memorabilia and get their jerseys. That's going to be their challenge. And the problem with it is this, is like, every year new rookies come in and J-Rod might be a great player. He might be a generational Hall of Fame player. In reality, if you look at the statistics, only one or two Hall of Fame players come into the game every year on average. If you go back all the way, to the beginning of baseball. Some years are more, some years are less, some years are zero, right? But on average, it's about, let's say 1 to 2 players a year come in. That's going to be a Hall of Famer. And of those 1 or 2 players, a majority of them are just Hall of Fame players. They're John Smoltz. They're let's trying to pick on like maybe Gaylord Perry's not a good example because he kind of was eccentric, but they're Phil Necro. They're people that aren't going to move the needle from a coolness of the hobby perspective. There's only a few Ken Griffey Juniors and Willie Mays and players who really were exciting, Roberto Clemente, that made people really want to watch the game. And I think that is, again, another challenge is that baseball in general, it's very difficult for one player to take over a game, right? Barry Bonds was probably the last player we saw really do that, where it just was about him. It was like the Barry Bonds show. And then steroids happened, and that kind of got taken away. So I think as we look at this hobby in general and how Fanatics wants to attack it, they're going to need some help. They're going to need one of these players to not only be a generational talent, but also be charismatic, good with kids, want to do these kind of videos that J-Rod did. So again, this might be something great that is at the beginning, right? But if J-Rod goes out there and just has a normal career, just is good, isn't great, then you have to go to the next person, then the next person, the next person, on and on and on until you find that magical person that's going to be your standard bearer for the hobby. And that is right now, I think, a big problem for Fanatics. So let me know what you guys think. Do you really agree that baseball doesn't have at least one person in the top 50, the most, influential or marketable athletes in the world? I kind of think it's true, but you can disagree. Do you agree that Mike Trout is kind of boring and isn't really a good person to lead this hobby into this growth area, and that another player like J-Rod or Tatis is going to be that guy? Let me know in the comments. But this is just my take. Hopefully you guys can have an engaging comment section, and we'll engage and have a good discussion. And I'll see you next time on Cards and Comics. Bye.